That day, she woke up early as usual, prepared coffee, and went for a walk around the neighborhood to breathe in the fresh air. But after walking for less than 10 minutes, she felt something heavy in her chest. Her limbs felt sluggish, and her breathing was labored. She thought it was because she had not slept well the night before. Who would have thought? You know, from the age of 60 onwards, the body doesn't warn us with sirens, but with very small, very subtle signs. The only thing is we often ignore them because we think, oh, I guess I'm old. And that subjectivity kills people, my children. My husband Bill died 8 years ago. It was exactly the same. At first he was just tired. His legs often hurt and he couldn't sleep at night. But within 3 months he had a heart attack and died. The doctor said that if he had discovered it earlier, he might still be alive. Until now. I tell this story not to pity you, but to warn you. Your body always knows how to tell you if something is wrong. It's just whether you listen or not. If this is your first time visiting my channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the true stories and valuable lessons from life. And remember to watch until the end of the video because I will share 9 silent but extremely dangerous signs of clogged arteries that I have personally experienced, signs that seem harmless but can take your life if ignored. Don't take your eyes off them, and if you or someone you know has ever experienced something similar, please leave a comment below or send this video to a friend or family member who knows we might just save someone's life with just a share button. Signs. 1. Chest pain. Chest discomfort like someone is pressing on it. I still remember the feeling when I first realized my body was on alert. At that time, I was carrying a bag of groceries from the market, just a small bag, nothing heavy. But as soon as I reached the doorstep, I suddenly felt like someone was pressing down on my chest with both hands. It wasn't a severe pain, just a feeling of heaviness, tightness in the chest. But strangely, it was unlike any other time I had had a stomachache. At first, I thought it was probably because of the change in weather that day, or because I was tired after going to the market. I sat down to rest, drank some water, and the feeling subsided. So I ignored it, didn't tell anyone, and didn't go to the doctor. But then it kept happening. Every time I did anything even remotely strenuous, I felt a tightening in my chest, like there was a band around my heart. It wasn't the pain people portray in the movies as heart attacks. It was gentle but persistent, and it always made me nervous. I just didn't want to admit it. You see, many people I know have experienced the same thing, from my husband Bill to my neighbor Doris, who lives down the street. Doris told me that she used to feel sharp pains when shoveling snow in her front yard, but she thought it was because of the cold or old age. Then one day she collapsed in her yard. Luckily, her daughter arrived in time and called 911. The doctor said it was a sign of angina, which is a lack of blood flow to the heart, an early warning sign of a heart attack. The scary thing's that it wasn't what people thought it was. It wasn't as intense, it wasn't stabbing. It comes on quietly, gently, and is easily confused with indigestion or normal fatigue. And we old people are often subjective, thinking that our bodies are getting weaker with age, but rarely thinking about cardiovascular problems. If you've ever felt like that, even if it is just a little heaviness in the chest when climbing stairs or when walking quickly, I strongly advise you do not ignore it. You do not need to panic, but do not be subjective. Go to the doctor, because if detected early, people can control it. Do not wait until the body collapses to admit that something is wrong. And if you are someone who has had a relative with a heart attack, or has ever seen your father, mother, or partner with chest pain, but refused to go to the doctor, you will understand why I emphasize this so much. We lose loved ones not because they are too weak, but because they do not know how to listen to their bodies. Now let me tell you about the second sign, which I also ignored and thought was just me running out of breath due to age. It's unusual shortness of breath, and it's just as dangerous. But before I go any further, please do me ever. If the story I just shared reminds you of yourself or someone you love, leave a comment below. I really want to hear your story. And if you found this helpful, please share this video with your friends. You might just save someone's life by clicking the share button. If you haven't yet subscribed, do so now. I'll tell you more stories later, including lessons that I had to pay for with tears. Don't miss it. Second signs: shortness of breath. Shortness of breath. Like can't get enough oxygen. I remember the first time I realized something was wrong was when I was carrying a shopping bag from the garage to the kitchen. It wasn't too hot that day, and I could only walk a few dozen steps. But halfway down the hallway, I had to hold onto the wall because I couldn't breathe. Not the stuffy feeling of a cold, but the feeling of being out of breath, like I'd just run a marathon and my lungs weren't working anymore. I remember standing there, my heart pounding, my back drenched in sweat, even though I'd only been walking for a few minutes. I thought to myself I must be weak because I'd been so sedentary. But it continued not just when I was walking, even when I was sleeping. One night I had to jump up in the middle of the walk because it felt like my chest was being pressed down and I had to sit up to catch my breath. I once told this story to a close friend of mine. Her name is Helen, who lives in Northern California and is my age. Helen said, "Margaret, you should see a doctor right away. This is no joke. I had the same thing before they found out I had coronary artery disease." And sure enough, when I went to the doctor, he said that this was a classic sign of clogged arteries, not enough blood getting to the heart. So the heart had to work harder, and the lungs weren't getting enough oxygen to get to the rest of the body. It was terrifying because if I hadn't gone to the doctor sooner, I probably would have. What I'm trying to tell you is this shortness of breath is not normal as you age. Whether you're 60, 70, or 80, you should still be able to walk around the block without feeling like you're going to pass out. If you find yourself running upstairs, bending down to tie your shoelaces, or worse yet, lying down and feeling tight in your chest, don't wait. See a cardiologist. One thing I learned from my doctor is that when your arteries are blocked, blood can't flow freely, and your heart doesn't have enough oxygen to pump effectively. Your body will start to signal you by making you feel short of breath. It's your body's way of asking for help. A friend of mine, John, who lives in Wisconsin, had this happen to him. He was healthy, went bowling every week, but recently just carrying a bag of trash to his car would make him stop to catch his breath. When he finally went to the doctor, they discovered he had a blocked aorta, and if he didn't have surgery soon, he might not have a chance. So if you're having trouble breathing or feel like you need a lot of pillows to prop your head up because lying down makes it hard to breathe, it's no small thing. Don't use the excuse of "I'm old." No one should live in a state of constant fatigue due to lack of oxygen. And I repeat, if you are watching this video and you find something in my words that resonates with you or someone you know, please write a comment below. I read every single comment because I really care. And if you find this video helpful, don't hesitate to share it. You might just save someone who is silently suffering from shortness of breath without knowing why. Signs. 3. Constant fatigue. Unexpected exhaustion. I have to tell you the truth. This feeling of fatigue is not like the feeling of being exhausted after working in the garden all day. No, it is the kind of fatigue in every joint, every muscle. It seeps into every little action. Every morning when I wake up, I feel like I have been dragged all night. My eyes are burning, my limbs feel heavy as lead, and my spirit doesn't want to do anything. At that time, I thought maybe it's because I'm old. Who doesn't get tired when old, right? But the problem is, this kind of fatigue, even though I get enough sleep, enough rest, and eat well, still doesn't go away. I started skipping breakfast, even giving up the habit of taking a light walk in the afternoon, because I simply don't have the energy. When I told my daughter this, she is a nurse working at a senior living center in Ohio, she looked at me and said, "Mum, that kind of fatigue is not normal. Go get your heart checked." I think you have a lack of blood to your heart or a partially blocked artery. I shuddered when I heard this, because at that time I had no pain, no fever, nothing specific, just tired. But when I went for a checkup, the doctor told me it was true I had 70% coronary artery stenosis. That means there was a lack of blood to the heart, to other organs, and the heart had to work harder, causing the whole body to go into an energy-saving state. I felt like I had no vitality left. A doctor told me this Margaret without blood carrying oxygen and nutrients to the cells, it would be like a house without electricity. I shuddered when I heard it because it was so true. I used to think that fatigue was due to sadness that Bill had died, and I was depressed. But when I started taking medication, exercising lightly again, eating well, and following the doctor's instructions, the fatigue slowly disappeared. I felt like I was alive again. I tell you this, so that if you are experiencing the same feeling, you will understand. Fatigue is not a matter of age, especially when it persists, despite getting enough sleep, not doing heavy work, and having no other obvious medical conditions. It can be a sign that your heart is working hard to do a job that should be easy. But because the blood is not circulating well, the whole body is in a state of silent alarm. And what is more worrying, this is also the sign that I see appearing in most of my friends before they are diagnosed with clogged arteries or even strokes. Signs. Fourth, leg pain. Cramps, calf tires while walking, peripheral artery disease. I remember back then, it was a summer about 6 years ago. I used to go for an afternoon walk around my neighborhood. Each lap was only about 2 or 3 blocks, but back then I would stop after a few minutes. Not because I was tired, but because my calves ached as if someone had wrapped them tightly with a rubber band and pulled them hard. At first I thought it was because I was calcium deficient, or because I had sat too much the day before and the blood was not circulating. But it happened regularly, and strangely, as soon as I stopped to rest for a few minutes, the pain would go away. But when I started walking again, after only a few dozen steps, the feeling would return. My husband Bill had the same problem before he passed away. He would walk a few steps and complain of pain in his thighs and legs, to the point where he didn't want to leave the house. We thought it was arthritis. It wasn't until he went to the doctor that the diagnosis was peripheral artery disease, which means the arteries in his legs are blocked or narrowed, preventing enough blood from reaching the muscles when they move. Think of it this way. Muscles need more oxygen when they're working. But if the arteries are blocked and blood isn't flowing, the body responds by creating pain, as if it's telling you I can't breathe. The irony is, when you're resting, there's no pain because the muscles don't need as much oxygen. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to make you aware. There are many people, like my good friend Louise, who lives in Arizona, who have been confined to a wheelchair not because of weakness or a stroke, but because her peripheral artery disease got worse, leading to gangrene in her legs. By then, it was too late. A doctor once told me this. If blood can't get to your legs, what happens to your heart and brain? Blocked arteries in your legs aren't just a problem in your legs. They're a sign that your entire vascular system is in trouble, and your risk of a stroke or the heart attack is high. If you're walking around the block, or even just from the parking lot to the grocery store, and you feel pain, heaviness, or cramps in your thighs or calves, don't ignore it. Especially if it goes away when you sit down. It's not just muscle pain, it could be a blocked artery. And you know many people come to the hospital late thinking it's arthritis or old age. No, your body is sending you distress signals. You just have to listen to it. Signs. Fifth, cold sweat. Sudden unexpected nausea. Have you ever been sitting still doing nothing hard in cool weather and suddenly felt cold, sweaty like ice, and then felt nauseous and restless? I remember that feeling clearly because it happened to me one Saturday afternoon while I was watching an old movie, The Golden Girls, with a glass of iced tea next to me. Nothing special that day, But just a few minutes after I got up to refill my water, I felt myself starting to sweat. But not hot sweat, but cold sweat. My hands started to shake. My stomach felt like I wanted to throw up and my mind was spinning. I quickly sat down in a chair, slowed my breathing, thinking that it must be because I ate something bad at lunch. But my stomach didn't hurt, and I hadn't eaten much, had I? The feeling lasted about 10–15 minutes, then subsided. I didn't tell anyone, and again, I ignored it. Until it happened again 2 weeks later, this time more severely. I had to call my daughter to take me to the emergency room because I could barely stand on my own. And you know what shocked me the most? The doctor told me, "Margaret, the symptoms you just experienced are not caused by food or indigestion. They are a sign of a temporary lack of blood flow to the heart, possibly a mild myocardial infarction." I asked the doctor again, "Then why am I sweating and nauseous instead of having chest pain?" The doctor just smiled and said, "Not everyone who has a heart attack has chest pain. Women, especially the elderly, often have very strange symptoms, such as cold sweats, nausea, dizziness, fatigue, that few people think about the heart." I sat there in silence. Because now I understand. There are probably many women out there like me who are mistaking nausea for stomach upset, cold sweat for low blood sugar, and then missing the chance to save themselves. I'm not telling this story to scare you. But if you, or someone you love, ever experience unusual cold sweats or a queasy feeling in the stomach accompanied by fatigue, then get your heart checked right away. Don't wait until it turns into a real heart attack. An old neighbour of mine, Mr. Charles, a funny guy who often sang at neighbourhood BBQs, once told me that the day he had his heart attack, he didn't have any chest pain. He was sweating profusely and feeling like throwing up, as he put it. And luckily, his wife Linda didn't hesitate to call 911. Signs: 6. Fast. Rhythmic pulse in the chest. I remember one winter evening I was sitting knitting a scarf. It was an old habit I had kept since I lived in Vermont. The room was warm. There was no unusual noise. I didn't drink coffee, nor did I eat anything stimulating. And yet, suddenly I felt my heart beating very fast, pounding like a drum beating in the middle of a chamber music concert. I put down my knitting needles, put my hand on my chest. And sure enough, my heart was racing even though I was sitting still. There was no pain, no shortness of breath, but the feeling was clearly abnormal. Each beat was like a strong thump overwhelming my breathing, and then it slowed down slowly as if nothing had happened. I told myself, I guess I'm just nervous because I'm thinking about the past. But you know what? When it happened 3 more times in a month, it didn't seem like a big deal anymore. I went to see a cardiologist that time at the urging of my daughter, who always wanted me to call an ambulance when she heard her mother talk. She put me on a small device for 24 hours to monitor my heart rhythm. And the result, I had a temporary cardiac arrhythmia due to myocardial ischemia, a consequence of narrowing of the coronary arteries. That is, not enough blood is getting to the heart, so the heart has to pump harder, and then it starts beating irregularly. That heart palpitations that many older people think are due to stress or insomnia can actually be a warning sign of an impending heart attack. I have a friend, George, who thought he had chronic anxiety. He often felt his heart pounding when he stood up from a chair or after walking for a few minutes. But he never thought it was a heart problem because he didn't have chest pain. It wasn't until he fainted in his backyard that he discovered he had second-degree atrioventricular block, a serious heart rhythm disorder caused by chronic lack of blood to the heart. You know, the heart is a very resilient organ, but it also has its own way of calling for help. If you feel your heart beating abnormally fast or having skips missing beats and then beating again, don't ignore it. It could be a sign that you are lacking blood to your heart or that a part of your coronary artery is narrowing. And the scary thing is, many people die from heart attacks after a series of unexplained heart palpitations. The seventh sign, prolonged high blood pressure, the silent killer. You know there are things in life that when they happen, we realize we have been too subjective. High blood pressure is one of them. I used to think that blood pressure was just a matter of taking medicine, avoiding salt, and that was it. But no, it is something that silently erodes your heart and blood vessels every day, every hour, without you even knowing it. I found out I had high blood pressure when I went for a routine health checkup at the age of 65. The doctor finished measuring, looked at me and asked, "Do you feel dizzy or have a headache?" I laughed. Not at all. And the number that appeared was 156 out of 98. I even joked, "I still walk every afternoon, I feel very healthy." But the doctor did not laugh. He said, "Margaret, high blood pressure doesn't have to make you feel anything. It just silently damages the walls of your blood vessels. Little by little, every day, like someone gently scratching a pipe. At some point, the pipe will burst without anyone noticing." That sentence haunts me to this day. Then I started to learn and ask friends my age. My friend, Dorothy, in Minnesota, also had a mild stroke just because she stopped taking her blood pressure medication for a few weeks. She thought, "I feel fine, my blood pressure must be fine." And then one morning, half of her body was paralyzed. What I learned is this high blood pressure doesn't have to feel anything. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't make you call 911. It doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night. But it is the cause of most heart attacks and strokes in older adults in this country. And what's especially dangerous is that high blood pressure also hardens the arteries, allowing cholesterol and calcium to stick to the artery walls, forming plaque, leading to narrowing or blockage of the arteries. It opens the door to cardiovascular complications later, my friend. If you are living with high blood pressure, don't consider it a small matter. Take your medication regularly, have regular checkups, reduce salt, exercise lightly, and most importantly, monitor your blood pressure regularly at home. An automatic blood pressure monitor is not too expensive, but it can warn you before something bad happens. I know many people, especially older men, who say, "I'm fine, I feel fine." But you know what? It's the people who feel fine who collapse the most suddenly. Signs. Eighth, leg edema. Swelly ankles, sock marks that don't disappear quickly. I remember clearly the first time I realized something was wrong. It was a Monday. I went to Safeway as usual, stood in the checkout line for almost 15 minutes. When I got home, I sat down and took off my shoes and noticed that my ankles were red and slightly swollen. There was a sock mark on the ankle, and it still hadn't gone away after almost half an hour. I thought maybe I've been standing too long. Old people blood circulation is slow. But 2 days later, I noticed that my entire left leg was swollen more than usual. It was like I drank too much water or like I was retaining water. Then I remembered that my husband Bill had experienced the same thing. At the time, we thought he had weak kidneys. But after going to the doctor, he said it was a sign that his heart wasn't pumping enough blood, causing circulatory congestion, blood pooling in his legs instead of being pushed back up. The doctor used a medical term that I still remember to this day, edema, which means swelling in medical terms. It happens when the heart starts to weaken, can't pump blood effectively, causing blood to pool in the lower parts of the body, especially the legs, ankles, and sometimes the lower abdomen. I went to the doctor and they checked both my heart and kidneys. The result, my heart function was starting to decrease slightly, meaning my heart was wearing out without me knowing. It was all under control thanks to early detection, but if I had thought it was just water retention or a side effect of the medication, I'm not sure I would be healthy today. My friend Carol wasn't so lucky. She lives in Florida and she often wears soft slippers, so she didn't notice the swelling. It wasn't until her feet swelled so much that she couldn't wear shoes that she went to the doctor, and by then her heart was failing, leading to fluid buildup in her lungs. She was hospitalized for nearly 2 weeks. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this to make you pay more attention to the little things that we often ignore. If you notice swelling in your ankles, feet, or hands, or that your sock marks are taking forever to disappear, or that your old shoes suddenly feel tighter, it's not just because you're eating too much salt or not moving enough. It could be a sign that your heart isn't doing its job. Get checked out. A doctor's appointment can tell you a lot, and if caught early, it can be easily corrected with medication, diet, and light exercise. Better than waiting until the swelling has spread to your knees or makes you short of breath at night. 9. Pale cold or blue-purple skin on hands and feet. One spring morning in Oregon, I woke up as I usually do to make coffee. I looked down at my hands and noticed that my fingertips were slightly purple, as if I had been in a cold shower for a long time. But my room was warm, the heater was running, and I was still wearing a sweater. I touched my feet. They were icy cold, even though I had just gotten out of bed and worn socks all night. At first, I thought I had poor circulation due to age. But then, over the next few days, I noticed my feet were pale in the morning, then turned a slight blue-purple if I sat still for too long. My hands were always cold, even though I was dressed warmly. I told my daughter about this, and she immediately made an appointment with a vascular specialist. And I was glad I did. The doctor explained when arteries are narrowed or blocked, blood cannot reach distant areas like the hands and feet effectively, leading to a drop in temperature and a lack of oxygen in the area. In other words, the fingertips and toes are the first to be starved when the heart and blood vessels have problems. The doctor added that many older people, especially those who live in cold areas like New York, Montana, or northern states, often assume that cold hands and feet are due to the weather. But if you're dressed warmly in a closed room and your hands and feet are still cold, pale, or blue, it could be a sign of peripheral artery disease or even early-stage heart failure. I've seen this happen to an old friend of mine, Frank, in Kansas. He said that in the winter his toes would turn blue and one day they would even become so numb that he couldn't feel the heat. At first he thought old people are just cold. But then one day he noticed a small ulcer on his toe that wouldn't heal. When he went to the doctor, they found that his blood flow was almost non-existent, and he had to have angioplasty. You see, our bodies have a way of telling us that something is wrong. The only thing is, are we listening? If your hands and feet are always cold, despite wearing warm clothes, if your skin turns pale or blue when you sit for a long time, if you feel numbness or tingling in your fingers and toes, don't just assume it's the weather or poor circulation due to old age. It could be an early warning that your blood isn't pumping well, that your heart is struggling silently, and that your blood vessels are slowly becoming clogged. If you've ever seen yourself in any of these situations, or if you're caring for a loved one with similar symptoms, share your story in the comments. Not only will you help yourself, but you can also help many others who are watching this video. And if you know someone who lives in a cold place, is sedentary, or has a history of heart disease, send this video to them. You never know who needs to hear these words until they say thank you for reminding me. And if you haven't clicked subscribe, please do so now. Because after this series of videos, I will continue to tell you about ways to check your heart, health at home, light exercises for the elderly, and real stories from people who have overcome heart disease like me. Don't let complacency take away your loved ones or yourself. If my story is useful, click, subscribe, and share this video with a friend, relative, or someone you care about, because just one share can save a life you never thought possible. Thank you for listening to me until the end. And if you want me to continue with other topics, like how to eat for a healthy heart, how to choose the right doctor, or easy exercises for the elderly, just comment below. I want to hear more. I will be here continuing to tell, because every story is a chance for someone to live.